"Can I eat with you?" Little black girl asked. The billionaire couldn't hold back his tears. What if one simple question from a child could stop a billionaire in his tracks and change the course of an entire town? Cliff Maynard hadn't set foot in Shiloh, Georgia, in over 40 years. The town was a ghost to him, a place he'd buried deep in the recesses of his mind, alongside memories of a childhood he'd rather forget. At 62, he was a billionaire with a reputation for being ruthless, a man who turned failing companies into empires and small towns into sprawling developments. His latest project, a multi-million-dollar retail complex, was set to bulldoze half of Shiloh's east side, including a row of crumbling houses he'd acquired years ago through a blind trust. He didn't even know their addresses. He didn't care to. Cliff pushed open the door to Millie's Diner, the bell above jangling weakly. The place smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions, the same as it had when he was a kid sneaking nickels for a Coke. He was only here because his driver had gotten lost, and his next meeting with the county commissioner wasn't for another hour. His stomach growled, and his patience was thinner than the soles of his $1,000 loafers. He scanned the room for a seat, his jaw tight. Every booth was full, families laughing, truckers hunched over plates, old men nursing coffee mugs like they were lifelines. All except one. At the back, a little girl sat alone. She was maybe 8, her braided pigtails tied with bright pink beads that clicked softly as she swung her legs under the table. A half-eaten grilled cheese sat on a chipped plate in front of her, next to a glass of milk. Her brown eyes flicked up as Cliff approached, and for a moment, he thought she'd look away, shy like most kids. But she didn't. She held his gaze, unafraid, curious. "Can I eat with you?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the diner's hum like a bell. Cliff froze mid-step. The question was so simple, so unexpected, it threw him. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that. No deference, no agenda. Just a kid, asking to share a table. He glanced around, half expecting someone to claim her, but no one moved. The diner's chatter had quieted, eyes darting their way. He cleared his throat, adjusting his cufflinks. Sure," he muttered, sliding into the booth across from her. He didn't smile. He didn't do kids, or small talk, or cute. He just wanted his meal and to get out of this suffocating town. The girl grinned, her front teeth slightly gapped. "I'm Naomi," she said, picking up her sandwich and taking a big bite. "What's your name?" "Cliff," he said curtly, flagging down a waitress. He ordered a burger and a black coffee, his tone clipped, hoping that would be the end of it. But Naomi wasn't done. "You don't look like you're from here," she said, tilting her head. "You got a fancy suit. My grandma says people in suits are either lawyers or trouble." Cliff's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I'm neither," he said, loosening his tie. "Just passing through." Naomi nodded like she was sizing him up. "You look tired," she said matter-of-factly. "My grandma says tired people need pie. You want some pie?" He stared at her, unsure if she was serious. "No pie," he said, his voice gruff. "Just food." She shrugged, unbothered, and went back to her sandwich. Cliff leaned back, trying to ignore the weight of her presence. He wasn't good with kids. Never had been. His own daughter, estranged for years, was proof of that. But something about Naomi's ease, her lack of pretense, made it hard to dismiss her. She wasn't intimidated by him, and that was unsettling. The waitress dropped off Cliff's burger, and he ate in silence, or tried to. Naomi kept talking, about her school, her favorite book, something about a dragon who loved pancakes, and how she wanted a dog but her grandma said they couldn't afford one. Cliff nodded occasionally, his responses short, but Naomi didn't seem to mind. She filled the space between them with her chatter, her voice a steady hum that drowned out the diner's noise. "You ever had a dog?" she asked, wiping crumbs off her chin. Cliff paused, his fork hovering. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "When I was a kid. A mutt named Rusty." "What happened to him?" Naomi leaned forward, her elbows on the table. Cliff's jaw tightened. "Ran off," he said, though that wasn't the whole truth. Rusty had been his only friend in Shiloh, back when his mother was still alive, before his father's drinking turned their home into a war zone. He hadn't thought about Rusty in decades. Naomi frowned. That's sad. Dogs shouldn't run off. They should stay with their people. Cliff didn't respond, focusing on his burger. But Naomi's words lingered, tugging at something he'd buried long ago. He glanced at her, at the way her eyes sparkled when she talked, and felt a pang he couldn't name. "Where's your grandma?" he asked, changing the subject. "Why re you here alone?" Naomi's smile faded slightly. "She's at work. She cleans houses. I come here after school sometimes, 'cause it's close and Miss Millie lets me wait till Grandma's done." Cliff nodded, his gaze drifting to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky a bruised purple. He should have been thinking about his meeting, about the contracts waiting in his briefcase, but instead he was wondering how a kid like Naomi ended up eating alone in a diner. "What's your house like?" he asked, surprising himself. Naomi's face lit up. "It's small, but it's ours. Grandma says it's got character, but it leaks when it rains. We put buckets under the ceiling." She giggled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "She says we might have to move soon though. Some company wants to tear it down and build something big." Cliff's stomach twisted. He set his coffee down, his hand steady but his mind racing. "Where's your house?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Over on Maple Street," Naomi said. "The one with the blue shutters. Grandma says it's the prettiest on the block, even if it's old." Cliff's breath caught. Maple Street. He knew that street. He'd grown up there, in a house with blue shutters, before his mother died and his father sold it to pay off debts. He hadn't thought about that house in years, hadn't even realized he'd bought it back in some anonymous land deal. But now, sitting across from this little girl, the pieces clicked into place. That was his house. Naomi's home. Cliff didn't say anything for a long moment. His burger sat untouched, the diner's noise fading into a dull roar. Naomi was still talking, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him, telling him about the stray cat that sometimes slept on their porch. But Cliff wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere. Back in that house, back to the boy he'd been. He remembered the creak of the floorboards, the way his mother used to hum while she cooked, her voice soft and warm. He remembered the last time he saw her smile, right before the cancer took her. That house was the last place he'd felt safe, the last place he'd felt loved. After her death, his father's anger and the bottle had erased those memories, or so he'd thought. But now, sitting across from Naomi, they came rushing back. "You okay, Mr. Cliff?" Naomi's voice broke through his thoughts. She was looking at him, her brow furrowed. "Yeah," he lied, clearing his throat. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated. "Old stuff. Things I forgot about." Naomi nodded like she understood. "Grandma says old stuff can make you sad, but it's okay to remember. She says memories are like treasures, even the bad ones." Cliff's chest tightened. He didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. Instead, he asked, "What's your grandma's name?" "Evelyn," Naomi said proudly. "Evelyn Marie Carter." The name hit Cliff like a punch. Evelyn Carter. He hadn't heard it in decades, but he knew it. She'd been his mother's best friend, the one who'd brought casseroles after the funeral, who'd tried to check on him when his father started spiraling. He hadn't seen her since he left Shiloh at 17, running as far from this town as he could. And now, her granddaughter was sitting across from him, living in his childhood home. Cliff didn't sleep that night. He canceled his meeting with the county commissioner, citing a scheduling conflict, and spent hours in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling. The development project was a done deal, permits approved, investors lined up, bulldozers ready to roll. But Naomi's face, her voice, her story, wouldn't leave him. Neither would the memories of that house. The next morning, he drove to Maple Street. The house was smaller than he remembered, the paint peeling, the shutters faded but still blue. A bucket sat under a dripping gutter, just like Naomi had said. He stood there for a long time, his driver waiting in the car, until Evelyn Carter stepped out onto the porch. She was older now, her hair gray, her face lined with years, but her eyes were the same, kind, sharp, unyielding. "Clifford Maynard," she said, her voice steady. "Never thought I'd see you back here." He didn't know what to say. "I didn't know you lived here," he managed. "I didn't know about Naomi." Evelyn's gaze softened. "She's a good girl. Keeps me going. But this house," she shook her head. "It's all we've got, and now you're tearing it down." Cliff's throat burned. "I didn't know it was this house," he said. "I didn't know it was yours." Evelyn studied him. "What are you gonna do about it, then?" He didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. The decision had been made the moment Naomi asked to eat with him. Cliff called his team that afternoon and canceled the development project. The investors were furious, the county commissioner baffled, but Cliff didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt something other than exhaustion, other than detachment. He felt alive. He transferred ownership of the house to Evelyn, free and clear, and hired a contractor to fix the leaks, repaint the walls, and replace the sagging porch. But he didn't stop there. He went back to Millie's diner, sat down with the owner, and made an offer she couldn't refuse. By the end of the month, the diner was his, not to flip for profit, but to transform. Cliff turned Millie's into a community meal program, a place where kids like Naomi could eat for free, where families could gather without worrying about the bill. He hired local staff, funded cooking classes, and set up a scholarship fund for Shiloh's kids. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because of Naomi, because of the house, because of the boy he'd been and the man he wanted to be. Every Thursday at noon, Cliff drove back to Shiloh. He and Naomi would meet in their favorite booth, sharing grilled cheese and root beer, talking about dogs and dragons and the stray cat that now had a bed on Evelyn's porch. Naomi never knew the full story, how her simple question had unraveled a billionaire's plans, how her home was saved because of a memory she'd never know. But she didn't need to. She had Cliff, and he had her. The neon sign at Millie's diner still flickered, but the parking lot was full now, the tables packed with laughter and conversation. Shiloh wasn't just a ghost to Cliff anymore. It was home again, in a way he'd never expected. And every time he saw Naomi's smile, he felt his mother's presence, like a warm hand on his shoulder, guiding him back to the man he was meant to be. One Thursday, as they finished their root beers, Naomi looked at him with those big, curious eyes. "Mr. Cliff," she said, "you ever gonna leave Shiloh again?" He smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in years. "Not a chance," he said. "Not as long as you're here." And as the diner buzzed around them, Cliff Maynard, a man who'd spent his life building walls, finally let them fall, one grilled cheese at a time.